Chapter 456. Sir. They are getting closer. I know. Why didn't I just leave? I had to play the hero. Sir. I know, stop shouting, take the reins. Me. Yeah, do you see anyone else? A boy of around 12 looked up at Roland with wide eyes, his hands trembling as he reached for the reins. On the other end, a large lizard-like creature whose size exceeded a horse was speeding forward on a dirt road. It was pulling a large elongated somewhat armored wagon, which held some people inside. Behind them growling and shouting echoed as a group of armored men pursued them on horseback. They were armed with swords, axes, bows, and had woven monsters acting as their bloodhounds. The boy hesitated for a moment, unsure if he could handle the responsibility of controlling the large creature. But Roland's urgent tone spurred him into action, and he grabbed the reins tightly, trying to steady his nerves. He focused on guiding the creature forward in a way he saw Roland do it before, and to his surprise, the creature responded. Meanwhile, Roland positioned himself at the rear of the wagon, keeping a watchful eye on their pursuers. He could hear the pounding hooves of the horses drawing closer and their shouts growing louder with each passing second. The armored men closed in as the bulky carriage was quite heavy and slow. The crest the men carried on their clothes was a crowned stag. Their weapons glinted in the moonlight and continued to get closer with each passing moment. Well, it's too late to turn back now. Roland muttered to himself while activating the runes on his staff. While they were outnumbered, they were certainly not outmatched in terms of firepower. In a matter of seconds, multiple orbs of magical energy emerged above the wagon and shot forth in the direction of the pursuing battalion. The orbs of magical energy exploded upon impact, sending shockwaves rippling through the air. The pursuing riders were caught off guard, their formation disrupted as some were knocked off their mounts while others struggled to maintain control. The woven monsters howled in pain as the magical blasts hit them, causing them to scatter to avoid the damage. However, the numbers didn't seem to dwindle as the pursuers numbered in the hundreds. Will we make it, in time? Roland looked back at the boy, trying to hold back his tears, then glanced down to the roof of the wagon, where sounds of sniffling could be heard amidst the chaotic escape. Many people were with him, and he was the sole combatant. He turned his gaze back to the approaching forces and gathered his magic. He had already made a decision, and it was too late to go back now. While holding up his runic staff, he thought back to the choice he made not so long ago. Get back soon. Agni has been getting annoyed with the Solarian worshippers, some even followed him back home and tried to scale the fence. They did? Are you all right? Yes, they were shot down by the turrets before they went too close, luckily no one got hurt. I see, I'll have to talk to the Solarian bishop when I get back so something like this doesn't happen. I should be back in a day or two, not sure yet. Good, get back quick, everyone is waiting. Everyone. You might not realize how much some of them look up to you. Elydia chuckled as the two conversed through magical means. A little holographic image of her appeared before him as he rested in one of the city inns. After the incident with the supposed orphans, he had seemingly turned in for the night. He had purposely paid for a room with a large window through which he intended to sneak out in a few hours. Then he would disappear into the dark streets and make his way over the city wall, as if he was never there. His presence here would become known with time, and perhaps he would have some guards to contend with in the morning. Before that could happen, he needed to leave. I'm not sure about that. You underestimate your own charms sometimes. I'd wish you were more aware of them, mostly when you are around other women. Her sentence trailed off a bit at the end, so he didn't truly get it. The magical instruments they were using had some faults, and sometimes the audio cut off due to static or the person not talking directly into the microphone device. Hey? What's that? Oh, nothing. I'll be waiting. I love you. I love you too. After ending the call, a sense of warmth enveloped him. Knowing that he had someone waiting for him back home gave him newfound motivation. For Roland, who had expected to live a lonely life stuck in a smithy. This feeling was quite odd but also something he now desired. He wasn't sure if he would ever be able to go back to those old days, but this didn't change the fact that he preferred a limited number of people around him. He was still a true introvert at heart. Now that I'm able to make better spatial spaces, I should make some replacement parts. While waiting, Roland went over his RuneSmith the first armor set. It was slowly but surely reaching the limit of its life cycle. His skill that allowed him to reform his creations had been activated several times, and the runes had deteriorated as a result. He had patched up some critical places, but eventually, it would break down. Using his Overlord's Might skill in conjunction with magic increased the rate of failure. In a situation like this, it would be best to replace the parts directly, but he didn't have the resources to create multiple sets of this armor. I was gone for around a month and I asked the dwarves to leave some mithril for me. Arthur should have ordered the materials I asked for too. Once he returned home, he would be quite busy. Not only did he need to make a working prosthesis and a new runic armor, but he also had another project in mind. There was a reason why he had researched mage towers and dimensional magic. His next grand project would be to create a gate within his workshop, through which he could freely travel between the institute and his own home. This gate wouldn't be limited to just that. With his status as deputy professor, he would have access to many other gates throughout the kingdom. If he achieved this feat, traveling away from his home would become quite mundane. When creating a mage tower, it comes down to the power source and a tower spirit. Once that geothermal generator is up and running, the first issue will resolve itself, which would leave the spirit to help with the calculations. Roland saw the tower spirits as something similar to artificial intelligence which aided mages with various calculations. They utilized the magical energy stored within the towers to function. Otherwise, the mage would be compelled to activate everything manually. He had already prepared a certain thing for this issue and was eager to move into the testing phase once he was back home. I'll wait half an hour and head out. With all this in mind, he started to wait, and once the coast was clear it was time to make his way out through the window. He had already paid for his lodging, so with a clear conscience he activated some concealment runes. His body faded into the shadows and stopped producing any sounds. This helped him to arrive on the streets without alerting any of the patrolling guards. There was a loose curfew in this city, with some areas off limits during the late night hours. The district where most merchant-owned stores were located was one of them, usually under the watchful eye of the city lord. On the other hand, districts like the slums seemed to be ignored, with guards seldom wandering in even late at night. This made his plan a lot easier, as he could arrive at his destination by passing through the areas that were not being closely watched. He made his way through the back alleyways and the lack of street lights made his journey quite easy. Something like this wouldn't have been possible in Albrook, where they made sure to spread out the magical lanterns powered by magic. It was strange to look at things from the standpoint of someone who could affect the laws inside a settlement. However, this was not the time to gloat at the incompetence of the opposition. He needed to get out of here first. As he navigated through the maze of alleyways and narrow streets, Roland kept his senses sharp, alert for any signs of danger. One of his multiple minds was constantly peering at his mapping system, and during his travel he discovered something. One of the dots that was close by belonged to someone he had included in his database. Isn't that one of the guards that was with that pink-haired lady? When he rescued the young girl from the supposed bandits, he had entered the people gathered there into his database. This included the 4 loyal guards that were with her. 2 of them were here and seemed to be looking for something. His curiosity was piqued, but he already knew that this was probably more trouble. She is not here either, keep looking. It seemed that the damsel in distress had been taken away once again, with people searching for her within these slums. Roland quickly concealed his presence by climbing up onto one of the buildings, aided by a weight-reducing spell and another that allowed his hands to stick to the wall. After mimicking one of the fictional heroes from his old world, he continued to survey the area, confirming something he had already suspected. It was probably those guys, and I bet that brother-in-law is also involved. His map display and mana fingerprint recognition gave him a good idea of what was happening here. There were more people than just the 4 guards from earlier looking for this girl, and some of them were the men who were previously with Aubert Abrams. This wasn't the peculiar part, rather, it was who they were interacting with, and that was the bandits who supposedly attacked the young lady. It appeared that some of them had been working for or with Aubert and had not been killed by his troops. Instead, they somehow made it into the city and were now conversing with these other mercenaries. Let me guess. He orchestrated the bandit attack to get to the girl for some reason and mixed his mercenaries into the group. It was clear to Roland that Aubert was infatuated with the girl, who resembled a half-elf. However, she was betrothed to his younger brother instead. Roland speculated that Aubert might have planned to either kill the guards and take her with him or perhaps pretend to save her during the scuffle. His troops were hidden behind a hill which he noticed. Perhaps Aubert was even plotting to murder his brother eventually and take her as a prize, or something entirely different. Nevertheless, they would likely be unable to find her, as the majority of people were on the side of the older brother and were probably hindering their search. They aren't even looking, just standing around and waiting, but, should I involve myself with something like this? While Roland felt bad about the whole situation, what was he supposed to do? Informing the younger brother about the ruse wouldn't work, as he wasn't someone trustworthy. Moreover, intervening could potentially draw unwanted attention to himself, especially from Theodore and his knight commanders. The situation was delicate, and Roland didn't want to inadvertently put himself or his friends in danger by getting involved in someone else's family drama. I need to focus on getting out of here unnoticed. My priority should be returning home safely. If I cause a scene and they realize that I'm from Albrook, it will complicate things. With a heavy heart, Roland decided to leave the scene and continue his journey out of the city. He didn't want to directly involve himself in this situation anymore and was planning to create a spell similar to the one Arian used to contact him. He could at least provide the truth to the young fiancé and hope that he would be able to deal with the situation himself. However, to complicate things, he noticed another mana signature that wasn't that far away either. It's that brat, what is he doing out there at this hour? Roland found himself involved in an unexpected event not long ago while wandering through the slums. He had saved some kids from loan sharks, and now the oldest from the bunch was moving through the darkened alleyways. Something must have happened, as that young man was a survivor and seemed quite bright. Moving through the streets at this time wasn't wise, so he probably had a good reason for it. Elidia's face popped into Roland's mind as he attempted to remove himself from the situation. He knew he would probably regret it, but something about this situation bothered him. While he was okay leaving the merchants to their own problems, it was different when it came to orphans, even he had a soft spot for them. Roland realized he would regret it if he just left things alone, especially since it seemed the young man had found himself in some trouble. As he approached what appeared to be an abandoned building, a thuggish-looking individual emerged to stop him. It was evident that the boy had attempted to sneak in there for some reason but was instantly caught. He watched from the shadows as the confrontation unfolded. The thug was clearly trying to intimidate the young man, but he wasn't budging. "Are you trying to get me in trouble, kid? You know the rules. Back off, you're not going in. Let me through, you damn bastard. I know that you took them." The kid swung wildly at the adult but was clearly outmatched. It seemed that the man was having a good laugh as the farmer boy tried to hit him. After sending him back with one kick, Roland still wasn't sure what this was about. However, just as Roland was debating whether or not to intervene, he noticed a glint of metal in the thug's hand. It was a dagger, and it was clear that the situation was escalating quickly. "I gave you a chance, kid. I don't know what got into you, but you'll have to pay that price, and your ear will do." After a cackle escaped from the man's mouth, he pulled out his dagger and started approaching the child with a menacing look on his face. It didn't seem like it was a joke either, and it was time for him to step in. "I'm not scared of you. Haha, you're a bad liar. The boy had a knife of his own, but it was clear that he was outmatched. Luckily, before the thuggish man could approach him, he was halted in his tracks. "Hey? What is this? I can't move." A strange scene unfolded before the boy as the man's words ceased. His mouth moved, but no words came out. Then he began convulsing, as if he were underwater with no air to breathe. In a matter of moments, he dropped to the ground like a puppet whose strings had been cut, and from behind him emerged a cloaked figure. "It's you!" the boy called out while still holding the knife and pointing it at Roland. He was prepared to disable the child if he attacked him, but instead, the boy dropped down to his knees and started to cry. "Please, help me, they took them, they took Leia and the others." Leia was the name of the girl who was with the young men when he saved them from the money lenders. It seemed that she had gotten herself in some trouble, but also that more of the children were missing. "Who took them and who are they? Calm down and tell me everything, I'm not your enemy." Roland replied in a softer tone, one he parroted from his wife, who was skilled at speaking with children. The boy wiped his tears and tried to compose himself as he relayed the events leading up to Leia and the others being taken. "After you left, we decided to leave the city. We even found some merchants that were willing to help us, but... The boy whipped his eyes with his sleeve and quickly replied. "Someone must have seen us and the money. They ambushed us as we were returning. We ran and scattered. I was the only one to get away." "I see," Roland replied, analyzing the situation. He had to admit to himself that it was perhaps not the brightest idea to give orphans a large amount of money. He hadn't expected them to flaunt it around so much and to attract the attention of thieves in the area. Now, he would need to make up for his mistake. Chapter 457. "Hey, why the hell are you taking so long? We're gonna get in trouble if... Hey!" A man with a missing front tooth walked out to see a collapsed man on the ground. It was the person they were looking for, but to their surprise, he wasn't alone. A large hooded man stood next to him, and along with him, there was a young boy. However, before he could call for more help, the sound around him seemed to disperse. Quickly after all sounds disappeared, he found himself being yanked towards the cloaked man. There was nothing he could do, and he felt his neck being squeezed by the unknown assailant. Soon everything went dark, and the last thing before he passed out was a strange prickly feeling of electricity running through his body. "At least these guards aren't too bright." Roland gave out a sigh before releasing the man he had just shocked with lightning magic. There were now 2 people down and the path forward was open as the man he just disabled had left the door unlocked. However, before he did anything else, he needed to address the boy who was with him. The young man couldn't accompany him into the building, but Roland could at least gather some information to prepare. "Listen, I need you to tell me everything you know about this place. Does this involve the Thieves' Guild or only the local criminal syndicates? Tell me everything you know, leave nothing out as it could save the lives of your friends. Does this mean that you will help us?" The boy broke down and cried in front of him, but it didn't seem like he expected Roland to be willing to help. Roland noticed that the young man was still shivering, so he decided to kneel at his eye level. He attempted a more compassionate approach, even removing his hood to reveal his mithril helmet underneath. While he didn't reveal his face, his visor allowed his eyes to be seen. "Yes, I'll help you. But I need information to make sure we approach this situation with efficiency. The more I know, the better. Can you do that for me? Can you tell me who those people are that took your friends?" The boy sniffled, wiping his tears away with the back of his hand, but quickly after, his expression changed. "Why yeah, I can. I'll tell you everything I know." "Good." Roland listened as the boy recounted what he knew about the area, the people involved, and any potential leads regarding the whereabouts of the missing children. There was a lot more information than he expected. It seemed that this street urchin had quite a lot of information about these assailants. First of all, it didn't seem that they were directly part of the Thieves' Guild, but rather something like an affiliate. This place was probably owned by a crime lord, similar to the ones Roland took care of back in Albrook. This made things slightly better, as he wouldn't be going directly against the guild and their leader, something that was better to avoid. However, once inside, he needed to keep his identity hidden. It was possible that once everything was over, the owner of this place could put a bounty on his head. There would probably be some crazy assassins that would be willing to kill even a knight commander for the right price. Roland couldn't allow himself to be identified, as he would be putting himself in danger and everyone around him. Using people around a strong target as bait was a strategy for criminals. He couldn't let his wife be used as a hostage or his friends be targeted just because of his actions. Going about this discreetly was a must, and luckily this new robe along with his armor could help him conceal his identity. Hiding the runes was a possibility, and he had already changed the structure of his helmet that would help keep his identity hidden. Unless someone pried him out of his clothes, he was confident in keeping himself hidden. You've seen them take out people and move them into large wagons. Yes, I think they should be in one of these buildings too. Something caught his attention, and Roland looked at his mapping device. It was obvious that this entrance led underground, where the whole situation was taking place. The buildings above ground seemed abandoned, but surprisingly, no beggars or homeless people dared to come here. Most of the buildings in the slums were occupied by someone, which meant that they were just afraid to rest in them. There are a few people there, but their levels are too high to be beggars. They are guarding something. If what this kid is saying is true, then this must be an illegal slave trafficking operation. He had an idea of what he was dealing with, so now he had to handle it. His hand connected with the ground he was standing on, and a strange orange light surrounded him. This action scared the boy slightly, but no explosions were going to occur. Don't worry, I'm just performing a scan. A scan? There was no time to explain, but Roland quickly increased the range of his mapping device and began copying the layout of the underground lair he was about to assault. Within a minute or so, he had a rough map of the area stored inside his armor. There were quite a few of them down there, but luckily, this was just a gathering spot and not a venue where they presented or sold slaves. Good, they probably just gather them here before selling them off to slave traders. This seemed to be only a drop-off point, which would make things a bit easier. For a moment, Roland wondered if he would need to contend with some rich merchants and nobles and their guards. He had heard rumors of some depraved places that held auctions for rare slaves. Even though slavery wasn't forbidden, it was only allowed to buy sanctioned debt or criminal slaves. This didn't stop places like this from appearing, where they grabbed orphans from the streets or other unfortunate people. What's your name? It's Vico, sir. Good Vico, do you know how magic scrolls work? And not really. Have you ever used your mana to activate a skill or any type of enchanted item? I think so. The boy was a villager with the only skill Roland could see being farming, which was a passive skill. Luckily, he had at least activated some type of magical device in the past and had just enough mana to use the card-sized runic scrolls that Roland had made. Good, these are magical scrolls. Use these to protect yourself. If you look at the back, they have drawings of what they do and explanations on how to use them. I want you to go hide in that building over there and wait until I come out with your friends. Only use them if you get into trouble, do you understand? Why yes, sir. The young man nodded and seemed to have accepted the fact that he was getting some help. Now it was up to Roland to do his best superhero impression and go save the children. He wished to do everything quietly, as the thugs here didn't seem too strong. However, he needed to account for the possibility of things going wrong. With a plan in mind and his resolve set, Roland ventured into the abandoned building. He kept his eye on the boy to see if he followed his advice, and he did. At first glance, this place didn't look that off, but Roland knew there was a secret passage somewhere. It didn't take him long to discover an out-of-place sculpture next to a thick wall. This was his way inside. There seemed to be some sort of mechanism in place to open the hidden door. The two guards had no keys, so Roland assumed that some type of switch or lever had to be nearby. After a few glances, he discovered one of the bricks was a bit different, and after a small push, something was activated. With a soft click, the wall shifted, revealing a narrow staircase leading down into darkness. "Here I go." After taking a deep breath, Roland descended the staircase, his senses on high alert. The air grew colder as he went deeper underground, and the faint sound of voices echoed in the distance. He made sure to cancel out the sounds around the shifting door in hopes of sneaking up on his next two victims. "Ugh, this is so boring. Yeah, wished they would let us drink some booze." Two armored men were leaning against the brick walls with torchlight flickering nearby. Suddenly, the torches started going out, dimming the room. Then, out of nowhere, a strange black fog engulfed the entire area, blocking out the remaining light. The two men were stunned, but before they could shout for help, they found themselves unable to breathe. The dark vapor entered through their mouths, causing them to cough before collapsing to the floor. Soon, the darkness subsided, and Roland emerged from the shadows. "This is a good opportunity to test out some new runes. This dark miasma is quite potent in these closed spaces but could cause some collateral damage." Roland took a moment to observe the effects of his new runes. The dark mist he had conjured was effective in incapacitating the guards and also left them with a poisoned effect. Even if they woke up afterward, they would be unable to do anything for a while. Before him was a large metal door, this one without a hidden mechanism to open it. Slowly, he pushed one side open and peeked inside, where he saw a long corridor potentially housing his targets. This was likely the main dungeon where the abducted people were taken, and the entrance Roland found was just one of several ways inside. Other tunnels likely led to similar entrances, potentially guarded by more personnel who would intervene if anything happened. The lack of traps indicated that these captors weren't expecting any successful escape attempts. There was a notable absence of any individuals possessing combat classes among the captives, which may have contributed to the lack of security measures. "I'll just remove the poisonous effect and take it from there." Roland swiftly adjusted his runic spell to suit the situation. Inside, he found nearly 30 people, making it challenging to locate the 4 orphans he sought, especially since he hadn't included them in his mana fingerprint database. However, one person present was within his database, one that could complicate matters. Just like previously, the dark fog entered the dungeon through the door and extinguished the torches that were lighting it up. Once anything was swallowed up, all sound ceased and the few guards within were left in a state of confusion. Once everything was devoured by the darkness, Roland took advantage of the chaos he created. The captives started panicking, but the altered spell would not harm them. Roland moved swiftly, his steps silent as he navigated through the darkened corridor. His enhanced vision allowed him to see clearly despite the lack of light. He didn't really need to approach any of the guards as his runic spells did all the work for him. There were no screams but only confusion as the guards ended up slamming into the walls and being choked out by invisible hands. It only took him a few moments, but everyone had been disabled and the curtain of darkness could be now dispersed. The prisoners had mixed expressions on their faces as they saw that black smokescreen clearing up. Some looked curious, others were frightened, uncertain of what this third-party person wanted here or what was happening. Roland looked around calmly as he could now see every captured person and noticed one thing. All of them were either somewhat attractive or young, and he didn't want to think about why. Silence enveloped the area as Roland's imposing figure was unveiled. Numerous cells lined the chamber, each constructed from simple steel, offering little resistance to those with higher-tier combat classes. The occupants of the cells began to retreat as Roland surveyed the area. His gaze eventually settled on one cell, where he spotted a child, the same girl who had narrowly escaped the clutches of the lone collectors. Beside her were the other children he needed to rescue, along with an unexpected addition, a pink-haired woman with slightly elongated ears. "Why you? Did you come to rescue me? Please, help me." It was the young woman he rescued from the carriage. It appeared that she had been dragged here and placed into one of the cells. While he didn't reveal his face, his aura was the same. Even when his robe changed colors and was longer than before, it couldn't hide the fact that it had a mighty mage underneath. The young woman was quite frantic to get out, and he wondered why her brother-in-law wanted to take her here. "Listen up, because I'm not going to repeat myself." Before she could scream at him anymore, he decided to set a few ground rules. There were far too many people here for him to handle or rescue. At most, he could lead all of them out through the way he came in. From there, he wished to bid them farewell, but after looking at some of them, he decided to offer everyone a choice. "I will open up all of your cells and all of you will follow me outside. From there I will give you two choices. You may either leave and try your luck in the city, or if you wish, you may come with me and we will leave together." This was not something that he had planned, but some of the people here looked like they would not last for long. The children he was rescuing weren't the only ones in danger, there were others who might fall back into the hands of the slave traders. The adults, like the woman with pink hair, could at least seek safety with their families or the guards searching for them. The rest could join him, and he would see through what he had begun, as they were now his responsibility. Roland could sense the fear lingering in the air, mingled with a glimmer of hope at the prospect of freedom. The cells were locked, but he could easily tear them apart, but before that happened, he needed to prepare this place for their escape. From within his spatial space, he took out circular orbs covered in runes and began sticking them to some of the walls. For their escape, they needed a distraction, and this would produce quite the spectacle once they left. The location was cramped, with only a handful of vacant rooms likely used by the guards, making it convenient to set the charges and proceed with freeing the prisoners. As the bars began to bend without any visible force acting upon them, everyone watched in astonishment. "Let's go!" he called out in a calm tone, but the people remained hesitant to move. Fortunately, two groups here were familiar with him. The half-elven woman approached his side first, followed by the four children who likely recognized him by now. "Everyone, be calm, this sir isn't our enemy, we can trust his words. Follow me and try to stay silent." After some encouragement, the group finally decided to trust him. Roland led them back through the darkened corridor to the entrance he had used. Their footsteps made no sound, and the rescued captives stuck close together while still wary of their strange savior. Roland remained focused on his task and scanned the area for potential threats, but fortunately, none of the guards stationed outside had noticed anything amiss. Soon, he led them to the dungeon door and waited patiently as everyone ascended while making sure they all made it through safely. Once they were all clear, he quickly placed a few runic charges on the walls and followed them out. The stairs led them up to the secret passage he stepped through, and finally, they were out. "We are really outside." "Hey, stop, you're going out of the spell's range." Despite his shouts, the people didn't heed his warnings. As soon as they caught sight of the outside, a large proportion of them started running. This reaction was somewhat anticipated, yet he had hoped they would exercise more caution. Now, he feared their noise would alert other hidden sentries nearby, which left him with little time to escape and keep the young ones safe. It's Plan B then, or perhaps even Plan C, just great. Chapter 458. "Master Alphonse, would you like to have some more of the vine? Your glass seems to be empty." "If thou art compelled, it would indeed be a squander to decline." "Quite." Aubert Abram's smile brightened as he snapped his fingers. From the side, a stunning woman with an elven-like appearance moved gracefully to carry out his order. She poured the red wine into the seemingly nobleman's glass, her movements fluid and elegant. Her long red hair shimmered under the candlelight, and her partially elongated ears hinted at a mixed heritage. The man sat in an expensive-looking chair, his attire more militaristic than regal, yet he exuded authority and confidence in his posture and demeanor. As he took a sip from the large wine glass, those around him dared not speak. Besides the beautiful woman and Aubert, various other lovely ladies waited nearby, all with lowered heads, seemingly fearful of catching Alphonse's gaze. "Pray, where hath we left off?" "Ah, yet, we were conversing upon the recent advancements in our modest enterprise. I trust thou hast successfully procured the cargo. Of course, Master Alphonse, everything is proceeding according to plan. The slaw. I mean the shipment is ready for shipping and we have prepared everything just as before. Most splendid. I shall entrust my men with its safeguarding, as is customary. However, there is a matter, I yearn to ascertain. Ah, what is Master Alphonse? Pray, do allow me to address the recent commotion concerning the young lady hailing from the Albemonde merchant family. I've been privy to some disquieting tidings. Might this pose an inconvenience? An inconvenience? No, everything will be fine, she won't be a problem. She may have chosen my fool of a brother, but if she is not there to be wed, then my position as the heir will not be impeded. Aubert replied in a confident tone before this important guest. The man was part of the Valerian house, directly under Theodore Valerian, the individual who could alter Aubert's destiny. Everyone knew he was one of the main candidates for the duke position. Despite the forbidden nature of their endeavors, so long as their illegal slave trade remained undetected, the profits gained would enrich the coffers of this noble figure. It was an investment in the future. If the man ascended to the position of duke, their merchant family would attain unprecedented heights. Splendid! The knight commander nodded, and everything seemed fine. Aubert could already envision himself atop the world, with riches rivaling royalty. However, his excitement didn't last long, as a knock echoed against the door to the private chamber. Instantly, he sensed that something had gone wrong, as his people would not have disturbed this important meeting otherwise. "What is it? How dare you interrupt us?" he responded to the knock with a commanding tone. The door creaked open, revealing a panicked subordinate who swiftly entered the room. It was a lone man who resembled a butler, and he promptly reacted to Aubert's nod. He knew speaking out in front of the guest wouldn't be wise. Instead, he approached his master and whispered into Aubert's ear, his expression tense with urgency. Master Aubert, there has been an intrusion at one of the locations." Aubert's heart sank at the news. Intrusion meant trouble, and trouble was the last thing he needed, especially during such a crucial meeting. To his surprise, before the man could continue with the report, the man Alphonse spoke out instead. "Pray tell, what manner of incursion do you speak of?" Alphonse was a Tier 3 class holder and a superhuman compared to the people gathered here. It wasn't surprising that he was able to hear the news, and it seemed that he wasn't too pleased about this revelation. "It's nothing that you should worry about, Master Alphonse. My people will take care of you." "Indeed? Nonetheless, I am inclined to request enlightenment on this matter, as it pertains to our collaborative endeavor, for which I bear accountability." The knight commander put the large wine glass away and his demeanor changed. The atmosphere in the room shifted as Alphonse's gaze bore into Aubert with an intensity that made him shudder. Aubert knew he couldn't brush off the intrusion lightly, especially not in front of someone as influential and powerful as Knight Alphonse. "Master Alphonse, I assure you, it's just a minor hiccup. A few meddling fools trying to disrupt our operations. Rest assured, my men are dealing with it as we speak." Aubert attempted to downplay the situation, hoping to alleviate Alphonse's concerns. However, the knight commander didn't seem convinced, and his piercing gaze remained fixed on Aubert. "Be that as it may, kindly instruct your attendant to recount the events that partook." The subordinate hesitated for a moment, glancing nervously between Aubert and the imposing figure of Knight Alphonse. Only after the man that paid his wages gave him another nod, did he begin recounting the events that transpired a few moments ago. Roland tried not to sigh as he watched more than half of the prisoners escape the moment they made their way out of the underground prison. They scattered in all directions, clearly lacking trust in their savior clad in darkened armor. With a shake of his head, Roland quickly shifted his focus back to the group that remained with him. It consisted of the 4 children that he had promised to save, the pink-haired woman, and a few other random people who seemed confused. Roland knew he had to act quickly to get them to safety before the guards realized what had happened below. It's just a matter of time before someone gets seen or caught. Then this whole place will be crawling with thugs or even worse, city guards. There was a big possibility that someone influential in this city was pulling the strings from the shadows. While the merchant family was involved, they could potentially be merely scapegoats, with the true mastermind hiding elsewhere. Roland speculated that it was possible this operation was backed by the Thieves' Guild or, even worse, by the nobles residing in the city. Although this type of slavery was forbidden, many individuals in power were willing to turn a blind eye as long as significant profits were at stake. The one that owns this land is that guy. I need to get out of here now, but what should I do with her and the others? The people present were clearly non-combatants. Most of those who had been in the underground dungeon were half-elves. Sun elves and moon elves were renowned for their beauty, but they were unsuitable as slaves. Even when convicted of crimes, the kingdom had agreements with other nations. They sent them back to the lands of their origins instead, where they would be punished. However, half-breeds were often scorned. The elves appeared indifferent to their fate. Despite being only half-elves, they still retained much of their allure, making them a sought-after commodity in the slave markets. I need to go too, Sir Mage, you have my gratitude, but... Wait. The woman that he had rescued wanted to leave as well. She saw the others running and wished to follow. I understand your desire to leave and I won't stop you, but there are a few things you should know. That brother-in-law of yours is probably responsible for all of this. Aubert. I should have known that it was him. I bet you didn't, but his men are spread out through the city. If you run into any of them, then you'll end up in another jail cell. But, what should I do? The young woman looked up to him with pleading eyes. Roland hesitated as he didn't want to involve himself in this any more than necessary. However, he recognized that the girl would likely be safe if she managed to return to her fiancé or one of the loyal guards. With so many people now loose, it was a prime opportunity for her to make her escape, and with his assistance, it would be possible. Here, take this. This is a concealment scroll. Once activated, no one will be able to see you. He handed her 3 small runic card scrolls which he had previously prepared for his trip. The woman took it hesitantly, her eyes widening in surprise at the magical gift. This is incredible. Thank you so much, she exclaimed with a hint of gratitude in her voice. It seemed that she understood how to use the magical device. Use it wisely and make your way back to safety. Try to avoid any confrontations and stick to the shadows. The magical effect will only work for 5 minutes, so use it wisely. I will, thank you. With a final nod, the woman turned and disappeared into the darkness. The scroll was activated and concealed her from sight. Roland watched her go, hoping she would find her way to safety amidst the chaos of this night. That's one down. Now what about the rest? He was left with a group of children, the oldest probably at the same age of the young man he left behind outside. They were now his responsibility, and to continue with the plan, he needed to rendezvous with Vico. However, before this could happen, a magical explosion echoed in the place he was trying to take these kids to, and it prompted him to sprint in the direction of those sounds. Shit, did he get attacked by someone? The young man had been given a few scroll cards to defend himself. Roland had hoped that Vico would simply hide somewhere until everything was clear, but perhaps once the captured people dispersed, he also moved out of his hiding place. As Roland approached the building he was trying to reach, he noticed a commotion. A few guards stood in front of a charred person, one that seemingly received a bolt of electricity. It's Big Brother, he is in trouble. One of the children Roland had rescued shouted as their brother was being assaulted. 3 people were approaching him with weapons raised, but their attacks were ineffective as the weapons bounced away from the mana shield surrounding him. The young boy looked scared, his hands trembling as he dropped the rest of the scrolls on the ground and began to panic. Don't worry, I'll get him. Roland left the kids with a few reassuring words before he approached the 3 thugs. The building they occupied was more of a warehouse that housed a large carriage and the creature that pulled it. For some reason, it wasn't alerted by the commotion outside or inside, and the reason was probably the collar that it had around its neck. "Hey, who are why, Ak?" One of the men turned around to notice Roland approaching them. Before he could do anything, he was flung up against the wall, and his allies quickly suffered the same fate. Their bodies slid down the wall, unconscious from the impact. Roland stood before them, his imposing figure shining from the runes under his cloak. The children's older brother lay on the ground, still recovering from the shock he received. Roland approached him and knelt down, checking for any signs of serious injury. "Are you all right?" "Sir?" "Why, yes." "Good, get up, we have to go now, help me get everyone into the wagon, we have to leave." Roland wanted to scold the youth for exposing himself unnecessarily to danger, but there was no time to waste. The place housed the slavers' wagon, used to transport their captives. It was large and well armored, the perfect mode of transportation out of the city. Even the creature needed to pull it was there, likely hidden from sight. "Everyone! Why, you are safe!" While Roland attended to the creature, the children had a small reunion. The collar around its neck was enchanted, typically requiring a control device to operate. However, with his skills, Roland quickly attuned it to his runes, allowing him to give the creature simple commands, similar to a golem. With it under his control, the plan of escaping this place could commence. With the help of his Mana Hand spell, Roland managed to get the large lizard-like creature into a harness. Fortunately, he had seen a few of these slave wagons before, which made the task easier. Meanwhile, the children had a heartfelt reunion, and with a few convincing words from their eldest brother, they began making their way into the slaver's carriage. The other people, comprised of children between the ages of 12 and 10, followed suit. Some of the captives were still dazed by their ordeal, but they seemed to understand that they were being rescued. Before everyone was on board, Roland took out a few round objects from his spatial bag. He threw them into the distance, with one landing right next to the passed-out thugs. Once this was done, Roland climbed onto the driver's seat and used the reins to order the creature to move forward through the now open door leading outside. The creature obeyed Roland's commands, its massive form straining against the harness as it pulled the heavy carriage forward. They arrived outside the building and seemingly were clear to continue down the main street. He safely arrived on the main road, and while remaining vigilant, he guided the wagon with the escapees down it. With the help of his sound-cancelling spell, he was somewhat able to maneuver through the night towards his last destination, one of the city gates. "I hope this works, otherwise." While inside the criminal's lair, he discovered documents and identification emblems in the form of rings. If his hunch was correct, it might be possible to escape through the gate without further conflict. If the nobility were involved with these slaves, then the guards should recognize the wagon he had borrowed. He only needed to present himself as a new slave trader, and perhaps they would allow him to exit through the front door. There was movement behind him, but with the aid of some spells, even the patrolling guards couldn't detect their passage through the dark streets. "It's good that they don't have any lanterns, otherwise, they would have spotted me by now." He kept a watchful eye on the surroundings, alert for any sign of pursuit or interference. The children inside the carriage remained silent, clearly fearful of their fate. As they approached the city gates, Roland could see the guards stationed there, their forms barely visible in the dim light. He slowed the wagon's pace, trying to appear inconspicuous as he prepared himself for whatever might come next. The guards at the gate were surprised at the wagon that seemingly appeared from nowhere and approached it warily. At first, they seemed hostile, but the moment they witnessed the slave emblem along with the ring on his finger that he obviously showcased, they changed their tune. "Was there one of them coming tonight? I thought it was supposed to be tomorrow. Don't ask stupid questions and let them through. Do you remember what happened to the last guy?" Luck seemed to be on his side, as the guards here were fearful of the men behind the slavers. The gates that had been closed began to open, and he could release the grip on his staff that he was hiding away on the side. As the gates opened, Roland breathed a sigh of relief. The plan had worked, and they were now on the verge of escaping the city. He moved the reins and the creature moved forward, but the moment they entered the gate, an unexpected visitor appeared from behind. "Stop that wagon! Don't let them pass!" A man on horseback was charging in their direction, unmistakably a knight. The crest on his armor identified him as belonging to the landowners and the group Roland was attempting to avoid. His heart sank, but it was too late to retreat now. It was time to initiate his backup plan. It never goes smoothly, does it? Roland glanced at the display screen inside his armor. There, he could see all the runic charges he had previously planted in the criminal lair. Alongside them, he had positioned a few sensors to enable access from this distance. He had known that some people had already arrived there but had hoped that they wouldn't reach this gate in time. After confirming the absence of innocent bystanders, he quickly activated all the bombs that were placed and heard the echoes of the explosion quickly after. The guards at the gate were caught off guard, their attention diverted by the sudden chaos erupting within the city. The explosions threw a massive fireball into the sky that illuminated the streets and shook the ground beneath them. Roland seized the opportunity and ordered the creature to move through the now closing gate. Its large form strained against the weight of the wagon, but it surged forward with impunity. "Stop!" The gate's safety feature was activated by one of the guards, but just as the iron grate was about to fall down, it suddenly stopped in place. It remained there while Roland and the wagon passed through, leaving the chaos and confusion of the city behind them. "Don't let them escape, you fools!" The voice of the knight boomed from behind them and was accompanied by the sound of approaching hooves. The chase was on, and there was quite a way until he arrived home. Chapter 459. "Sir! Speak forthwith! We found some men, they are still alive. Lead me thither, perchance they can clarify this perplexing circumstance." Alphonse's voice dripped with disappointment as he surveyed the unfolding situation. As one of the knight commanders serving under Lord Theodore Valerian, he understood the necessity of less than honourable undertakings if they furthered his lord's ambitions. On this day, his task was to ensure the secrecy and profitability of their underground slave trade partner in this city. Though he harboured no fondness for the merchant involved, he recognized the significance of this off-the-books income the operation generated. In the cutthroat struggle for succession among the heirs, money was a vital weapon, and not all of it could be acquired through legitimate means or sponsors. Alexander Valerian, the current duke, remained silent until concrete evidence emerged and understood that every move was part of the ongoing war for power. He had gone through the same process, and all his children had heard rumors of some of his undertakings, some involving outright assassination. Alphonse followed the subordinate who was holding up a lantern. The area was now aglow with hand lanterns held by the mercenaries hired by the merchant leader, with his own men nearby on standby. He couldn't entirely rely on this man to keep things quiet. The young lady from the rival merchant group was meant to have been dealt with the day prior, but she had somehow survived and even managed to escape from this very location. To his knowledge, a powerful Tier 3 mage had appeared in the city, prompting him to intervene personally. As they approached the fallen men, Alphonse scrutinized them with a trained eye. The three thugs were battered and bruised, but still conscious. Their clothes were singed and evidence of the magic was hanging in the air. It seemed plausible that this mage had been hired by someone, considering his previous interventions to save the young lady from the rival merchants. However, it was also conceivable that he belonged to a rival faction, aiming to disrupt their operation, an angle Alphonse needed to investigate further. "Pray, do clarify what events have unfolded in this vicinity," the knight commander ordered, but before any of the men could answer, something caught his eye. It was only thanks to his senses he was made aware of a disturbance, a strange round object covered in glowing runes. His instincts screamed danger, and without hesitation, he darted in the opposite direction while pushing the mercenaries out of his way. "Hey! What?" The men were surprised, but almost instantly after, multiple explosions rocked the entire area. The force of the explosions sent shockwaves rippling through the ground, knocking down anyone and anything in their path. Debris flew through the air as flames erupted from the detonation points, casting an eerie glow over the chaos. Alphonse, propelled by instinct and years of combat experience, managed to evade the worst of the blasts and jumped to a safe distance as the fiery blasts engulfed the area where he had just stood. As the smoke cleared and the echoes of the explosions faded, Alphonse rose to his feet, his eyes scanning the surroundings. His armor was scorched, and his cloak singed in several places, but otherwise, he remained unharmed. The aftermath was quite devastating, with the ground having collapsed and the building he was just in reduced to rubble. The noise effectively woke up all the nearby residents, and quite a few of the mercenaries had been killed or injured. "Sir Alphonse, are you injured?" "I am unharmed." An armored man with the Valyrian emblem arrived soon after. He was his second in command and only answered to his orders. "Sir, should we check for survivors?" "Leave them be. Our immediate concern lies elsewhere. The perpetrator of this act cannot have ventured far. We seek a mage garbed in dark garbs, likely endeavoring to flee the city. Secure the city perimeter. Permit no one to depart." The Knight Commander issued his order, displaying his indifference towards the mercenaries. Quickly, he donned his helmet, distinguished by a blue comb atop, then pivoted on his heel. "Yes, sir. As you command." His subordinate saluted once more before darting off towards the other knights. Many of them lingered outside in the streets, ready to assemble at a moment's notice. The city was in turmoil, with shouts and cries echoing through the streets as residents and guards alike scrambled to make sense of the explosions. The one responsible for this disaster, however, was making his way through one of the city gates, his escape seen by some guards who could only watch. "There goes my cover, but at least I've managed to leave the city, and it should take them a while to assemble their forces to pursue me, but when they do, they will eventually catch up." Roland breathed a sigh of relief as they passed through the city gates and entered the open road beyond. The chaos and confusion of the explosions had likely diverted attention away from their escape, at least for the time being. However, they were not out of danger yet, and the way this wagon was moving was concerning. It looked more like a train cart than a carriage. While it was robust, it was not created for speed. It required a large monster to pull it, and turning would also be a problem. He assumed that whoever would be after them, would be on horseback and much faster. Eventually, they would catch up to them if they continued at this pace. Roland knew they needed to find a way to go around this problem, and there were a few choices. First choice, I drop off the kids somewhere and try luring away our pursuers. Probab, why not a good idea? Even the weakest monster they encounter will kill them all. There is no food here either, so letting them hide somewhere and then returning is also out of the question. What else can I do? Roland glanced back into the wagon where 10 individuals were resting. The farmer boy who asked him for help was trying to calm down his friends while also explaining to everyone that everything will be okay. The other 5 were of similar age as this group and for some reason had trusted him with their lives. Discarding them now would be a betrayal of that trust, and Roland had already made a decision. If we can't split up, then only one choice remains, pushing through to the border. Some luck was on their side, as this settlement that they had left wasn't that far off from Albrook, and more importantly, the lands that were Arthur's territory. While in the past they were unable to halt Theodore's troops from trespassing, things had changed. If they gathered all of their soldiers and he was there to lead them, then this issue could be potentially resolved. With this in mind, the runes on his helmet lit up slightly as he tried reaching the most important person for this plan to work. Common pickup. He looked at a pulsating representation of his magical call not being answered and continued to wait. There were no phones in this world or culture built around them, so it was possible to wait hours for someone to answer, but luckily, after a few minutes he heard a familiar voice. "Roland, I've heard that you were returning, are you nearby?" It was the voice of his favorite bastard son of the Duke, Arthur Valyrian. The two hadn't really talked in a month since Roland's departure, and he just sent him some text messages or pre-recorded voice lines to just confirm that he was still alive. "Not quite, I'll assume that if you are using my real name, you are somewhere private. Yes, I'm in my private quarters. You were lucky that I was working late, but are you sure you're not somewhere close? I need you to go through some of the city plans. I will when there is some time, but first, I need you to help me. I'm in some trouble and I need you to assemble the soldiers from Albrook. Assemble them? What kind of trouble are you in, Roland? I'll explain later, but for now, I need you to gather as many soldiers as you can. I'm heading towards the western border of your territory, towards Albrook. From the western side? Isn't that in Theodore's region? Arthur paused for a moment, but it didn't take him too long to figure out why Roland mentioned the border and the soldiers. It is. I've gotten myself in some trouble. It does sound, very well. I'll gather everyone up, but it could take a while. How many do you exactly need, and do they have to be combat ready? Roland was a bit surprised that Arthur didn't inquire about the situation more. It seemed that just asking was enough to make this young city lord move his troops. I'd say, everyone that's available, the more the better, even the new trainees. When they get there, just wait at the edge and don't cross through the border. Tell them to wait for a large carriage, one that slave traders use. I see, the numbers count, and a slave carriage, that's peculiar, but I understood. I'll send out the orders immediately. Hold tight, Roland. Help is on the way. Thank you, Arthur. I owe you one. You sure do, my friend, and I hope you know what you are doing. I hope so, and there is one last thing. Relief washed over Roland as Arthur accepted his plea for assistance. The soldiers en route from Albrook weren't solely dispatched to aid him against his pursuers, they served more as a contingency plan. Perhaps trouble could still be averted if his adversaries were sluggish, but there was a reason behind his worries. The presence of the Valyrian knight near the city gate caught him off guard, and it indicated a potential threat that could be coming. All right, everyone, listen up. Roland's voice rang out, drawing the attention of the wagon's occupants, who quickly turned towards him. He could see the fear in some of their eyes, but luckily Vico was there to calm them down. The boy seemed to trust him for some reason, and this helped immensely. We have a long journey ahead of us, and it won't be an easy one. But I need you all to remain calm and trust me. We're going to make it through this together. I swear that I won't let any harm befall any of you. Our destination is to the east of here, near the city of Albrook. Some of the children didn't fully grasp his words, but at least they weren't crying. Roland spoke softly and slowly, hoping to reassure them and make his instructions clear. However, only time would tell if they would remain calm when trouble eventually arrived. With that, they continued their journey through the main road, which proved to be a bumpy ride. As they traveled along the winding roads, Roland kept watch for any signs of pursuit. The moon was starting to go down and the night was starting to draw to a close. However, before dawn arrived, he noticed signs of trouble in the distance. There were several men on horses, with lanterns strapped to their mounts, clearly chasing after them. It has to be a scouting party. They were quite a bit away from them, but their speed was above theirs. Vico, the boy tasked with keeping the others calm, sensed that something was wrong. Roland's repeated glances into seemingly empty space did not go unnoticed. Sir, is everything all right? We might be in some trouble. Trouble? Their pursuers persisted in their advance, the monstrous lizard unable to shake them off. The deteriorating condition of the road only worsened their situation and allowed the pursuers to steadily close the distance. Finally, Roland instructed the young man to take the reins while he ascended onto the wagon, with his hammer staff. Using his magic, he unleashed a homing missile spell and successfully drove them back. Their pursuit had been stalled, but it was not over yet. That was only the scouting party, there are a lot more coming from behind. It was clear that more enemies were coming, and now that he was spotted, they had a proper target. The road he was going through was uneven, but it was the only way for this large wagon to follow. If he attempted to stray away from this path, they would only be slower and their pursuers would catch up even faster. This left them in a predicament as it was easy for their enemies to just follow the road. Can't use the forests to lose them, we'll just get stuck, but I can make it a lot harder for them to catch up, and I don't need to reveal my identity quite yet. Roland was likely a known figure among the Valyrian knights, making the use of his spider golems and revealing his runic armor a risky action. However, the major advantage of utilizing runes lay in their adaptability. They could mimic nearly every spell, including divine ones or those from other schools of magic. He spent time at the institute learning various other types of magic, not only dimensional ones. "Vico, are you all right?" "Yes, sir, leave it to me." The young farmer boy was surprisingly good at keeping the monster steady. It was as if he had some former training in the past, but this was not the time to ask for more questions. Roland took on his potion on top of the slaver wagon and started his plan of stalling their pursuers. There are a lot of them. In the distance, a swarm of lanterns illuminated the night, each one marking the presence of a mounted knight. It was clear that he had been unlucky, as such a large battalion of knights was nearby. Not just anyone could command such a force, so he had to assume a knight commander was among them. Alongside, there were likely other Tier 3 class holders present. Even for Roland, these numbers would be too much to handle, so there was only one way for him and the kids to come out of this unscathed. He raised his staff and directed it towards the ground, causing the earth beneath to soften. From within his spatial space emerged an array of runic objects, some circular, others simple scrolls or metallic implements. Quickly, they were scattered onto the softened ground, concealed from view. Once the approaching army passed over them, they would face a rude awakening. Placing runic mines from scrap metal wasn't his sole strategy, especially as this place was also populated by various other creatures. There was a reason merchants traveled with adventurer protection, and Roland intended to capitalize on it. With another wave of his staff, he conjured a pale ball of light that materialized and gently descended to the ground, even as the carriage pressed forward. Emitting a peculiar pulse, the pale light began to draw the attention of the monsters dwelling in these lands. Some of the more aggressive creatures detected the monster beaconing spell emitted by the strange orb. While it didn't affect all of them, those drawn out could serve as a brief distraction. Though natural monsters lacked the relentless drive of dungeon creatures, certain types were known to pose a threat even to fully armored charging knights. Soon, the charging battalion reached the first roadblock and Roland could hear some explosions echoing from the distance. It was like music to his ears as he heard the continuous explosions, which indicated a successful delay in their pursuers' progress. However, he couldn't afford to become complacent. He continued to lay down traps and obstacles, utilizing his knowledge of magic and the terrain to his advantage. As the chaos ensued behind them, the sounds of hooves continued to intensify and the monster howls were dying down. His pursuers were slowly gaining on them, but he was unwilling to stop. The children inside the wagon were surprisingly calm and Vico continued to steer the lizard in the right direction. As hours passed, Roland found himself forced to resume casting. This time, he conjured delayed magic arrows that hovered in mid-air. Once an enemy was in range, they would spring into action. However, their success was short-lived. The knights skillfully used their shields for defense, and even targeting their mounts failed to slow their advance. Time was clearly running out and his options were dwindling. Would they reach their territory in time, or would their relentless pursuer catch up? Chapter 460. "Yes, sir. What is it now?" "This creature, I don't think it will last for much longer, it's been running for almost a whole day." Roland concentrated on the soldiers gaining ground behind them, casting spells, and setting traps along their path. Despite his efforts to create distance, the pursuers consistently closed in. The primary obstacle was their wagon's speed. The lizard creature pulling it simply wasn't fast enough. It was good at maintaining a steady pace, but pushing it beyond that taxed its endurance. Roland cursed under his breath, realizing that eventually, the mounted knights would catch up to them. He needed to think of something and needed to do it fast. "Keep it steady, Vico." "Why yes, sir." The boy nodded, but it was clear that he was starting to panic. At first, it appeared that his spells were effective, but the relentless pursuit began to wear him down. As the soldiers spread out to the sides, they became much more difficult to handle. The traps had a limited area of effect, as did his spells. It felt akin to battling a hydra. For every obstacle he managed to overcome, 2 more emerged to take its place. My mana reserves are running low, using so many spells is too taxing, and even the runes on this armor are starting to burn into the mithril. What can I do? To aid in his decision-making, Roland brought up the map of the area while simultaneously scanning the surroundings with his own eyes. He knew they weren't far from his territory, but at their current pace, they would need more time. By his calculations, the enemy soldiers would likely catch up to them in around 30 minutes, potentially surrounding them once they did. They faced a steep hillside, with the road beginning to incline. Roland speculated that some of the knights may have maneuvered around the hill and were possibly lying in wait on the other side. Reaching the summit could mean being trapped between the two forces. While there was a chance to break through, it was risky. The wagon could falter, and once their momentum was stopped, they would be easy pickings for their pursuers. This isn't that far. If I could just go in a straight line and avoid the soldiers on the other side, then it could be possible. His mind raced at a superhuman rate as he made all the calculations. The plan formed in his head, and there was one way of them reaching the end of the road in one fell swoop. It was a problematic strategy, but after examining the wagon they were in, he was inclined to believe that it could work. This wagon was made from mostly metal to hold the slaves inside. It should theoretically last through the spell. At that moment, Roland stood atop the wagon, gripping his staff tightly in his right hand. The wagon boasted a somewhat rectangular shape, its roof arching overhead, creating a faint oval surface upon which he could stand or walk. It reminded him faintly of a train cart from his old world, and it seemed sturdy enough for what he was about to attempt. I'll probably need to use the shield as the conduit and a few of the golems, but it should work. Vico, hold it steady like before, don't worry about the beast, we won't need it for much longer. When you are close to the top, tell me. Okay, sir. After a brief moment of deliberation, Roland made his decision. Vico, who still held the reins to the exhausted lizard beast, simply nodded in response. Though the boy appeared confused by Roland's statement, he seemed to trust in his judgment. Meanwhile, the other kids remained huddled inside the slave cart, occasionally peering out of small holes meant to allow some fresh air into the stuffy interior. A precaution probably only there, to keep the captured people from suffocating. Roland maintained his silence, unsure of how to approach speaking to the frightened children. Thanks to Vico, however, they no longer seemed to fear him. To them, he was beginning to appear as a savior, and he was determined not to betray that trust. Thus, to start off his plan, he placed his shield on the floor and did it precisely in the center of the wagon. Some of the children looked puzzled as he retrieved another shield from beneath his robes, and their confusion only deepened as strange cube-shaped objects began to float out. Let's get to work, I only have around half an hour to do this. First, Roland activated the enchantments on his robe, causing it to retract onto itself. The magic allowed it to transform into a belt and in turn revealed his fully armored form. Though he was reluctant to be seen like this by Theodore's men, inside the cart, he was shielded from unwelcome gazes. The children, however, could now see him clearly, and their young eyes were captivated by the glowing runes and magic before them. Step back a bit, it will get warm in here for a moment, but bear with it. After holding his fingers together, Roland conjured something akin to a controlled blowtorch. Despite his efforts to shield the area, some heat still seeped through, but the children remained undeterred, their eyes fixed on him as he melted the corners of his shield into the floor. Once complete, the shield was fully connected to the lesser steel of the wagon, forming the central platform for his plan. Roland pressed on with his task, retrieving a spare runic hammer that would aid him in inscribing everything with traces. With time ticking away, he wasted no time in swiftly moving around the cart, hammering key areas. With each swing, he created more trace routes for the runes that needed to cover the entire structure of the cart for his plan to work. As Roland meticulously inscribed the runes onto the wagon's surface, he could feel the pressure mounting. Time was ticking away, and the enemy soldiers were drawing closer with each passing moment. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he worked with unmatched focus. The children watched in awe as the intricate patterns of the runes began to take shape, their young minds unable to comprehend the full extent of Roland's magical prowess. To them, he seemed like an archmage from the tales they had heard, who wielded powers beyond their wildest imaginations. After the last runic trace was forced into place, Roland took a step back to survey his handiwork. The wagon was now adorned with a complex network of runic traces that connected to the shield in the middle. It wasn't his best work, nor would the metal hold for long, but this would have to do. He nodded in satisfaction, and it was just in time as Vico called out to him. "Sir, we're almost at the top and we are slowing down." "That's fine, you did well, Vico. Now go back inside, I'll take it from here." The boy looked quite exhausted as he was forced to stay up all night. As Vico retreated into the wagon, Roland let the robe expand over his body once more. With his runic armor covered again, he moved to the coachman's seat. There he was able to see that his assumption was correct, and they were indeed facing a large group of knights. They were positioned at the foot of the hill, and their leader stood out by wearing a distinctive helmet adorned with a large comb. "It's that commander I've met, this explains why they were able to organize so quickly. I guess, this is it. I really hope this thing lasts through it, otherwise this might get bloody." Roland did not wish to face these people out on the field. While they only numbered in the 30s, killing brought him no joy. Moreover, even if he managed to defeat them all, the reinforcements approaching from behind would likely catch up, potentially exposing his true identity and causing trouble for Arthur. Nevertheless, Roland remained determined not to give up. He held on to the belief that his contraption would ultimately lead him back home. "Everyone, hold on to something and don't let go, this might get a bit bumpy. Sir Alphonse, we can see the wagon, it's coming down the hill. Prepare yourselves. Ready the shielding artifacts at once." A group of armored men stood at the foot of the hill, their eyes fixed on the descending wagon. It was clear to them that the beast that was pulling it was starting to slow down, as it was even being pushed by the momentum of the cart as it descended. They were dealing with a powerful mage that had been evading their pursuit for more than a day. However, this would be where they corner this criminal. First off, a line of 10 men spread out, each one holding a shield enchanted to block spells. They understood that they were facing a spellcaster, and in such situations, magic was best countered with more magic. They speculated that their enemy was likely reaching the end of their mana pool. Casting spells for an extended period and continuously consuming mana potions would inevitably lead to toxicity backlash. Alphonse was well aware of this and awaited the opportune moment to strike. Behind the group of shield bearers, another 10 mounted knights stood, armed with hand crossbows. This was a new, specialized weapon capable of firing 2 bolts simultaneously. Enchanted to turn their ammunition into explosives upon collision, these crossbows were a large addition to their arsenal. Additionally, the mounted archers also carried longbows, ready to be employed once the crossbows were depleted. Then in the third row, stood the knight commander Alphonse himself, his imposing figure clad in ornate armor adorned with the sigil of House Valerian. Alphonse stood with his most trusted men, ready to engage the mage in melee combat once the wagon was brought to a halt. Their objective was not to negotiate or seek explanations, rather, they were there to silence him and ensure that no one ever knew of this encounter. "Sir! What seems to be the matter? Something is happening. Pray, elaborate on your statement. Speak clearly." Suddenly, a knight peering through a spyglass caught sight of something peculiar. He struggled to articulate what he saw to the knight commander, but eventually answered the question. "Sir, the wagon, it seems to be rising. It is ascending." It didn't make sense to him, but he couldn't ignore the word of this knight, as he knew that none of them would ever lie to him. Instead, he moved his horse forward, to see with his own eyes if this wagon was indeed rising or if it was just tumbling down the hill. As Alphonse approached, his eyes widened in disbelief at the sight before him. The wagon, instead of hurtling down the hillside as expected, was indeed rising into the air. It defied all logic and expectation, leaving the knight commander momentarily stunned. The man quickly recovered and started shouting out orders to his men. "Ready yourselves! It appears to be a levitation spell, likely of temporary duration. The mage must be in dire straits." Alphonse's voice rang out, commanding authority and instilling confidence in his men. They swiftly adjusted their positions, readying themselves for whatever was to come. The shield-bearers tightened their grips on their enchanted shields, while the mounted knights readied their crossbows and longbows, aiming at the airborne wagon. The knight commander observed a figure. A lone man stood at the front. With a raised hand, the man conjured a blade made of blue flames, its intense heat unmistakable even from a distance. With precision, he brought the blade down, severing the connections between the wagon and the beast pulling it. As the wagon started soaring, the lizard creature was momentarily dragged upward. However, once the connections were cut, the beast fell down to the ground where it now rested. Their target, on the other hand, now liberated from its restraints, started to soar at an increased pace. Initially, it appeared that the increase in speed wouldn't be much. A levitation spell merely removed the weight but didn't provide any additional forward momentum. Alphonse anticipated that the wagon wouldn't move much faster than its current pace, which wasn't much more than before. He presumed their enemy was attempting to gain some distance, possibly with the intention of crashing the wagon and making an escape. However, Alphonse soon realized this was not the case. It continued to rise into the air and increase in speed. To make things worse, the mage that was in the front produced a strange spell. A dense grey mist enveloped the flying cart, concealing it entirely beneath a cloud-like veil. The magical cloud's size far exceeded that of the wagon, and was clearly there to hide it from view. Alphonse quickly turned to his men and gave an order. It seemed that their target was going to push through. Before it could go past them, it needed to be shot down. "What on earth are you all waiting for, you imbeciles? Utilize your crossbows post-haste and bring it down." The mounted knights immediately obeyed their commander's command, raising their hand crossbows and taking aim at the obscured wagon. With expert precision, they fired their enchanted bolts toward the moving target, hoping to bring it crashing down to the ground. The bolts streaked through the air and approached the strange mist cloud before exploding inside of it. At first, it seemed that the target had been hit, but to their surprise, the cloud continued to streak through the air, its speed continuously increasing as if it was unaffected. The cloud persisted in its forward movement, unaffected by the barrage of enchanted bolts unleashed by Alphonse's men. Despite the sound of multiple magical collisions, it showed no signs of slowing down. Soon the knights prepared for another volley which, after being fired, was intercepted by a large shower of bolts of mana. These bolts homed in on each projectile with uncanny accuracy, colliding with them and triggering premature magical explosions. "Yes, sir, what do we do now?" one of the knights asked as the cloud containing the wagon streaked through the sky. They were not out of their range and their speed continued to increase. Alphonse gritted his teeth, his mind racing as he watched the scene unfold before him. Their target was getting away at a rapid pace that exceeded the capabilities of their horses, but in his mind, it was not over. "We gave chase. One of you shall remain and apprise the remainder of our company of our current location. But sir, if we continue any much further, then we will arrive in the territory of the other lord." "I am cognizant of that fact, however, it holds no significance. The scoundrel is inconsequential. Let us depart ere he becomes aware of our presence." "Yes, sir." Alphonse urged his mount forward, leading his men in a swift pursuit of the airborne wagon that was rocketing into the distance. He knew that time was of the essence. If they allowed the mage to reach the territory of another lord, it would complicate matters greatly. While he didn't fear the man known as Arthur Valerian, he knew that his knight commander was strong. Their priority was to apprehend the rogue mage and to bring him back into their territory. As long as they weren't caught red-handed, the other party would be powerless to intervene. The pursuit continued, but unbeknownst to Alphonse, the young Valyrian noble whom he had no respect for, wasn't far away. A battalion of well over 100 armoured soldiers was not far from here, and more seemed to be coming. They were all gathering at one specific location, which was on the path between Aldbourne and Albrook. "Lord Arthur, are you sure this is the correct spot?" "This should be it, we just need to wait and Wayland will arrive. He even gave me the map location, the coordinates should be correct." A man adorned in fashionable armour, distinguished by his silvery white hair, sat astride a regal-looking steed. Beside him stood a woman, standing firmly on her own 2 feet. Her most striking feature was her feline ears, which set her apart amidst the armoured soldiers and knights. Despite her unusual appearance, she held an air of importance, evident in her ability to converse with their leader. Not long after, the two were alerted to something approaching from a distance. A strange blazing inferno hurtled toward them, streaking like a star from the direction their ally was supposed to arrive. The man named Arthur squinted with his eyes as he tried to ascertain what this thing was. "Is that the fabled meteor spell? Lord Arthur, it's coming right for us. Spread out. Take cover behind the rocks and trees, protect yourselves." Their leader shouted at his soldiers and knights, quickly telling everyone to take cover. The meteor was hurling right for them, and if it was really the fabled spell of old, then the explosion would be devastating.